Well, good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see you. I thought I'd just say a couple of words because I'm really proud to be presenting this piece. It is a very important piece, a very special piece, and it's an important time to be presenting it. I mean, this is a month of pride for the LGBTQ XR community, and this piece is very special. So I've tried hard in my tenure to choose pieces from the contemporary repertoire which are really universal, really tried and tested pieces, some of the most produced pieces of the last 10 years, and this is absolutely one of those. Greg Spears is an extraordinary composer. He's been featured in many summer seasons. He had a world premiere at Santa Fe last year. And his music has been described by our director as if Monteverdi and a 1950s jukebox had a love child. And it really does have all of history. It has all of this kind of Baroque influence in it, but also this kind of postmodern minimalist style. And the score, this score kind of sobs and sighs with yearning and longing all of the way through. One of the reasons I love it is that it's not just the yearning and the longing of the central love story, because at its heart it's absolutely a very beautiful and heartbreaking love story, but also of what America could and should be. And that is something we should be thinking about in this 250th anniversary year. I mean, on a political scale, it's about the state-sponsored persecution of a minority. And unfortunately, we're seeing that with our trans community at the moment. And it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for many people on my campus and across the country. So this speaks to that in any guise and at any time. And it's a constant problem in our society across the world. So it's an important piece, but it's also an incredibly powerful opera. And if you're just coming to the opera for the first time, the music is totally accessible, as Maestro will show you. And it will also, you'll need to bring a lot of tissues, because it does everything that an opera is meant to do. It's just a beautiful, beautiful cathartic experience. And we are really, really happy to have Kelly back, who's not only a distinguished alum of our resident artist at the time Young Artist program, but was here for Elizabeth Cree and did an extraordinary job. Never have our orchestra appreciated a conductor more than they did Maestro Quo. So I'm going to let Kathy introduce Kelly, and then Kelly will tell you all about this beautiful piece. But please get all of your friends to come and see it. It's really extraordinary. Thank you.
So here we are, midway through Talking Opera. And my name, I imagine most of you know me, my name is Kathy Isley. And tonight we have Kelly Quo. And because this series is a series with conductors, I hunt in people's biographies for information about how they got into that position. And I couldn't find much on his official biography, but I had notes from 2 years ago. And that told me that he started out playing a clarinetist, and I visited with him tonight a little bit. He also had a little bit of piano. But when he decided he wanted to do music, he really had to seriously get into piano. And he must have done a good job, because he managed to get a piano performance degree, which they are not easy to accomplish. Let's see, and then I learned tonight that he spent some time at Houston Grand Opera, where he was one of the pianist accompanists. And I've had a chance to visit with a couple of those folks over the years, because that's what you get to do if you're really active in the Guild. And what incredible skill those people need to have. And he didn't necessarily think that he wanted to become a conductor. And when he came here in 2000, he was coming as one of those piano coach accompanists. So he's developed conducting. He had a chance in life. He's currently the music director of the Reno Chamber Orchestra, an associate artistic director of the American Lyric Theater. He has a conducting repertoire. His bio is a little inaccurate. 110 operas now. And an affinity for interpreting contemporary scores. I thought about that business of contemporary scores. And when you hear something that you know, again, you might compare it to what you've experienced in the past. When you hear something that you've never heard before, then it's really his job to make that music lovely to you and to help the music interpret the story, along with everybody else. And as you know, when you go to an opera, you're trying to understand the story. You're listening to the music. You're looking at the scenery and the costumes and everything. So that's why Maestro always tells you to go to things more than once. And Kelly is coming up now to give us a lot of background that will help make our first viewing, listening to fellow travelers more interesting. So.
Good evening, everyone. As Rob said about my time with Glimmerglass Opera as a young artist at the time was very much foundational for me in terms of my eventual career in opera, and I'm very, very grateful for the opportunity to have spent some time as a young person here learning the ropes from so many of the mentoring staff and conductors at that time, and to be in the position now to be able to do the same for the next generation is very, very meaningful for me to be here. And as Kathy said, also, I was here for Elizabeth Cree 2 years ago, and how many of you heard or saw Elizabeth Cree? Yes, a good number of you, thank you. Unlike Elizabeth Cree, that was my first time conducting that piece, with Fellow Travelers, it's actually not my first time. I've actually worked on the piece before. We just started rehearsals on Monday, so I guess I don't even know what day of the week it is. We've only had 2 days of rehearsal, essentially 2 days, because we had a day of music. So, but you're here to learn about Fellow Travelers, so I'm just going to get right to it. And if we have any time at the end, I will take some questions from you. When you talk about the genesis of Fellow Travelers, the opera, you have to start with the director of the production for this Glimmerglass Festival this summer, and that is Kevin Newberry. In 2007, Kevin's producer friend, Sterling Zinsmeier, handed him Tom Mallon's novel just right after it came out, and he said, "You have to read this. This story must be an opera, and you must direct it." How many of you have actually read Tom Mallon's book? A couple, okay. So even if you haven't, this opera is essentially one that follows the overall arc of the book, as opposed to a miniseries that has recently come out, which I have not watched myself, but it's my understanding that that miniseries uses the book as a starting point, but then goes off a little bit further than that. So if you watch the miniseries, then this opera may not take some of the same journey as that miniseries. But this was the book, Fellow Travelers. It still looks like that. I actually have a copy here in my lodgings, and I always find it meaningful to reconnect with the original source material whenever I can, because that is what inspired the opera. But Kevin did not know much about the Lavender Scare or that period in history, so he learned a lot by reading the book, and he fell in love with the three main characters. And he was driving and heard music from an opera called Paul's Case. He's like, "Who's the composer?" Well, it turns out that was Greg Spears. And he knew immediately, Kevin knew immediately, that he was the right composer to commission to write music for the opera. So I'm going to play a little bit of Act 2 Intermezzo from Paul's Case, which was Gregory Spears' first opera. So there's a very unique sound. If soon as you hear music from fellow travelers, you will identify as something very similar to what you just heard there. There's a distinctive blend of minimalism, but romanticism, and also early music influences, as Rob was referring to earlier. Gregory Spears most recently had premieres at Santa Fe Opera, an opera called The Righteous, and even more recently than that, Opera Philadelphia premiered his opera Sleepers Awake, which is about the legend of Sleeping Beauty. So he is very much in vogue right now as far as a composer. There he is on top, along with our librettist, Greg Pierce. So Greg Pierce was the librettist that Kevin Newberry commissioned to write the libretto, and the team was then created. If you don't know Greg Pierce, if you have seen the opera The Hours at the Metropolitan Opera, written by Kevin Putz, the music, I should say, written by Kevin Putz, the librettist for The Hours. And unlike most 21st century operas, there was no opera company involved at all until the piece was fully written. Cincinnati Opera created a new initiative called Opera Fusion, a collaboration with the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music, and they asked Kevin Newberry if he knew of any pieces in progress that he could recommend workshopping. And the opera workshop was so successful that Cincinnati Opera elected to present the premiere, which happened in 2016, so 10 years ago. So now we are at our 10th anniversary of this particular piece. And there was a new production that Kevin created that is going on tour to 10 cities in the United States in this very important year. It was premiered in Seattle earlier this year, and now we are here in Cooperstown. So when you talk about the Lavender Scare, you can't avoid talking about Executive Order 10450. The Lavender Scare was essentially something that ran in parallel with the Red Scare. How many people are familiar with the Red Scare? Yes. Keep your hands up. And of those who have your hands up, how many of you knew about the Lavender Scare at the same time? Keep your hands up. Exactly. So not everyone. It was essentially the anti-communist paranoia was also something that fueled the targeted persecution of gay and lesbian government workers who were considered easy targets for blackmail by enemy agents. And thanks to this 1953 order, over 5,000 men and women were fired from government service for either being queer or rumored to be queer. At the center of it all was this Wisconsin senator, Joe McCarthy. He rose to prominence by leading investigations to remove those he accused of communism and so-called deviants and homosexuals from government positions. People think of communism as being the central tenet of McCarthyism, but actually the Lavender Scare was much bigger. And they went after a lot more homosexual than alleged communists. It involved keeping files on people, keeping records, spying on people, and filing away their stories. So much so that Kevin took that as inspiration for this production. You will see filing cabinets on stage that get bigger and more numerous over the course of the evening, just in parallel with a number of cases that are being brought into this light over the period of time that the opera takes place. How many people recognize that place? DuPont Circle, exactly, yes. Washington, D.C. So this is the stage for the beginning of the story of the opera. It's a love story, as Rob said, that is set to music that manages to be both beautiful and familiar, yet fresh. And on a park bench in DuPont Circle, we immediately meet the two central characters of Timothy Laughlin, who is a wide-eyed Fordham graduate, newly arrived in Washington as an intern at a newspaper. And you also have Hawkins Fuller, whose nickname is Hawk, and he's a gentleman who works in a State Department. And let's just say that there's instant chemistry between the two. Spears's early music influences also included troubadours from the 13th and 12th centuries. Troubadours were ones that sang, often in a very sensual manner. to express private and forbidden love in a public and ritualized setting. So I thought it might be good to listen and get acquainted with what type of music that might sound like. So here is a little bit of some troubadour music.
Perché mos prets munte poia e mos ciamme iura tanna e al cor d'amor de gioie de dosso perché il ciel me sembra flor e la leo verdura.
So you hear some of that melisma where there's multiple fast notes moving on one text. And in the first duet that you hear in this piece, the character of Hawkins Fuller, or Hawk, sings musical gestures that are reminiscent of these troubadours. It gives away that he's suave and worldly, and it's the energy that sets the ball in motion for a love affair. And the orchestra also picks up on these troubadour gestures too. So we're going to listen to a little bit of scene 1 and listen to see how both the instruments and Hawk, especially who is the lower voice, the baritone, as opposed to Timothy, who is the tenor, and see if you can pick up on some of these troubadour-like gestures.
I was just at a wedding. Over at St. Matthew's, Joe McCarthy, lucky devil, who do you know? No one, I'm reporting for the Star, it's just an internship. So who was there? Come on, name names. Vice President Nixon, Teddy Roosevelt's daughter, Mrs. Longworth, Senator John F. Kennedy. McCarthy, that's efficiency. Married his office girl, she'll crank out his baby and crank out his press release. Who gets married on a Tuesday lunch break? Who gets married on a Tuesday lunch? On a Tuesday lunch break? Is that why you came to this town to be a reporter? No, I was an English major at Fordham, so. What would you rather be doing? What would you rather be doing?
So you know from his last lines there, he asked Tim, what would you rather be doing? Suggesting a little bit of innuendo there. And that when it's paired with that troubadour-like music, it infers that there is some underlying sexual tension there. And so that is sort of like the Easter egg for Greg Spears. Once you know about his fascination with troubadour music and association with the messages that these troubadours are sending in a public setting, but still with their voices able to woo or give a sense of sexuality in there, then you can understand that scene immediately. And then we move on to immediately going to a contrasting and very, very busy office scene. And it's setting up Tim's interview as a speechwriter for Senator Charles Potter. And you can hear the mechanical hustle and typewriters and gossiping in this really, really fast music. And you can also hear Tim's nervousness, which is evident in his repetition of text as well as nervous rhythms in those texts. So let's listen to a little bit of this office scene.
For an interview with Senator Potter. My name's Timothy Laughlin. My name's Timothy Laughlin. Someone phoned for me. I work for the Star. Oh, yes, Senator Potter's still at the hearings. He should be back soon if you wouldn't mind.
So you hear immediately, it sets you in a different atmosphere. And if you didn't know what was going on and you just heard that music, you know it's something very active. And I know you hear typewriter sounds in this particular recording, but even if there wasn't typewriters, you hear that there's some kind of bustling action happening, right? He's able to conjure that up immediately. Tim finds out that it was Hawk who actually helped set up the interview. So he buys a book to thank Hawk, and he goes to Hawk's office to deliver the gift. As we said, Gregory Spears' compositional style often references the past. And you can actually hear Baroque dance when he introduces the two female characters. Mary Johnson, who is Hawk's secretary, and she's a friendly Southern belle who in the past thought that maybe she and Hawk would get together. And then you'll have Miss Lightfoot, who represents the very suspicious side of the Lavender Scare. And you'll hear in this next excerpt from the third scene when she's talking about a colleague who was recently given the pink slip. If you know Ravel's Le Tombeau de Couperin, that reminds me a little bit of that Sicilian movement in that Baroque figure. And there, Miss Lightfoot, the character you see here, is saying, I bet you I know how he'll walk out of here, and imitates some more effeminate-like walking from her male colleague. As you've heard now in 3 different scenes, it's a pretty transparent orchestra texture. There's a chamber-sized ensemble of strings, winds, brass, and piano. In Glimmerglass's production, we actually have 27 total in the pit, which is a larger number than is usual for this particular piece. It was written for a smaller string section. But having conducted it before, and as we did with Elizabeth Cree, you might remember the original scoring for Elizabeth Cree was only single string players, so 5, but we enlarged that, and Kevin Putz loved it so much, I don't think he will ever go back. He will never let it go back to the original, because he just liked the idea and the sound that the strings and the larger numbers were able to give to the quality of the piece without overwhelming the singers. So we've done the same thing for Fellow Travelers. We've enhanced the number of string players, but we still only have 3 single wind players. We have a flute, oboe, and clarinet, no bassoon, and then we have 2 trombones. And you heard trombones earlier in the scene, the office scene. So now we have Spears, Greg Spears, adept at capturing a character through that text setting that's both idiomatic and also psychologically astute. In that same scene that we just visited, Tim's vocal lines will reveal his blushing and his nervousness through his stuttering and his tripping over words. This is when he's trying to deliver the book to Hawk's office, and he has to now give it to the ladies rather than Hawk himself.
Well, hello there. How can I help you?
I am looking for Hawkins Fuller.
You're in the right. I'm afraid he's not here at the moment.
So at the very end, sometimes the text is hard to understand, but he says, "I don't have a telephone." And Miss Lightfoot says, "Are you Amish?" So the pace of this moves sometimes with a lot of text and a lot of speeds, more reminiscent of what you might expect in a Broadway musical, so to speak, but obviously requires classically trained voices and to be able to project that text so quickly over this orchestration. The next scene is the romantic core of this first half, and Gregory Spears sets a progression of 8 chords. You think 8 chords, fairly simple, but the unpredictability of when the chords come sets up a tension and sensuality, and it sets up the duet between Timothy and Hawkins where they're dreaming of Bermuda together. But listen to these 8 chords.
I should take you to Bermuda, Bermuda, evermore.
So you know how like in The Rite of Spring of Stravinsky, there are these chords that happen in rapid succession, and sometimes accents. Boom, 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 pam, 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 boom, 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 pam, 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 pam. And you don't really know, well, a lot of musicians know those by heart now, but at the time when it was premiered, the unpredictability of when those accents were going to come was part of the mystery and the fanaticism around that piece. Well, these 8 chords also, if you're counting, you think, oh, it's 4 beats or it's 2 beats, it's predictable, but then it doesn't arrive like that. It just comes fully unexpected if you're hearing it for the first time. So in this duet, Hawk reminisces about in Bermuda, his experience with the bronze boys on the beach and biceps you wouldn't believe. Whereas Tim, who's never been, is fantasizing about sand as white as milk. It's very interesting in this duet that Greg Spears said it as though they're not listening to each other. They're singing with each other, but they're really in their own worlds talking about other things. It's like when we fall in love, we're both at the same time seeing a person, but also wanting them to fit into the mold of that person. So much so that sometimes you're not actually listening to what they're saying. So here is a little bit of how Greg Spears set that.
Probably done this before, lots of once or twice, lots of times. It's a great big world, it's a great big world. Oh, lots of times, lots of times, lots of times, always on the line, far away, as it sometimes.
So it feels like a courtship dance. You have that dance-like things underneath, but then you have the interweaving of two characters who are describing their own dreams, and then every now and then they come together and sing the same text. But really, underneath, they're really about themselves and thinking only about themselves. Just a really masterful way of setting that. And when you get the super titles, you'll understand the text specifically a little bit more easily than just by hearing this on the first time. So beyond the solos and the duets, the ensemble scenes are also very skillfully crafted. There is an office Christmas party where Miss Lightfoot overhears a private flirtatious conversation between Hawk and Tim. And so that sets off her radar because Hawk calls Tim his Irish tiger, and Miss Lightfoot says, "Irish tiger cub? What does he mean by that? Irish tiger cub?" And then she puts things together and goes, and that sets off her suspicion radar. Then you also hear Hawk going from one instant of wanting to get away with Tim from the office party, that's where we're going to start, and very next instant he turns into this conforming society man when he's introduced to Lucy, apparently a family friend. And what you don't know at this point is that she's going to become Hawk's future wife. And then even more ingenious is that it's a Christmas party, so at some point you start hearing fragments of Silent Night, just pointed throughout, and then finally singing this large chorus as though you do at Christmas carol parties. You start singing together, not always together, so they're not always changing at the same time, but everyone's in the mood of Silent Night. So this is a little bit of a taste of what that office party sounds like. There's a lot going on in there, but hopefully you could hear every now and then you hear or something other. It's passed in the orchestra a lot, and there's just a lot of information going on the stage that can't really be shown to you here via this audio, but it's a really, really powerful scene where all the plot is starting to advance very, very quickly. And then brings us to probably the most intimidating and chilling scene in the opera, and that is the interrogation of Hawk. Miss Lightfoot, who overheard that conversation, has reported Hawk. And so they've brought him in to text for his sexual orientation. And he has to walk across the room in a normal fashion. He has to read out loud an excerpt of a very suggestive book. And he also has to take a lie detector test. And the minimalism is represented by this torturous repetition of this ostinato C that's passed between instruments. So here's a little bit of the interrogation scene.
Please step into M304.
These rooms always have such catchy names.
Leave your coat here.
Quite a surprise getting your summons.
This shouldn't take long. We have sufficient reason to question you. Please let me be frank, Mr. Fuller. 80% of these investigations end with an admission of deviant behavior. As you know, the moral perversion and emotional immaturity of a sexual deviant make him the prime target of blackmail by anyone seeking to undermine the government of the United States.
I know I've heard one pansy can pollute an entire government office.
Right. Now, Mr. Fuller, please stand up and walk to the wall and back.
Walk how?
Normally, whatever you would consider normal. Read this aloud.
President Eisenhower revealed in his State of the Union message last January that he favors some form of home rule for the district.
Repeat the word district.
District.
Again.
District. Now this of human bondage. Philip opened a large cupboard filled with dresses, and stepping in, took as many of them as he could in his arms, and buried his face in them. I read good, don't I, teacher?
So you might have understood in that, if you were listening very carefully, that he was asked to repeat the word district because of the way that you might have a stereotypical lisp associated with an S. That was just one way that they would try to associate a potential sexual orientation. And then the text at the end that he was reading involved Philip going to his mother's closet and finding a chest full of his mother's clothes and putting his nose, breathing deeply into those clothes. And that's the text he was asked to read out loud. Yeah. As the men's relationship continues to develop, the central character of Mary, you remember Hawke's secretary, she serves as the protector really for both men in their relationship. And she's a very sympathetic character who really becomes the moral compass of the opera, even though at that Christmas party she ends up having a fling that results in an unwanted pregnancy. And you may remember that at that time abortion was also not a very accepted topic. But in any case, she sings a beautiful aria to Timmy, telling him how much she worries about him in this relationship. And so it's one of the most beautiful parts of the opera, so we're going to listen to a little bit of it now.
If you know what I mean.
So you hear those vocal flourishes in there which give off, or they betray her inner feelings, that how nervous she is about that and how petrified and about Timmy getting into this relationship even further with Hawk. And we have the wonderful Keely Futerer, who you may remember from past seasons, singing the role of Mary Johnson, and she has the voice and the movement of the voice to be able to accomplish that quite beautifully. So after Hawk and Tim's relationship falls apart, it has to do with Tim's desire for not monogamy and Hawk's desire not to have monogamy. So Tim enlists himself in the army to free himself from this relationship, and he ends up being stationed in Europe. In the meantime, Hawk marries Lucy, the childhood child friend, and then sometime later, Tim returns to Washington eventually, and again resumes his affair with Hawk. But very quickly, the lies become too much, and Tim has had enough, and he leaves Hawk to contemplate what could have been in this really, probably one of the most stunning arias I've encountered in 21st century opera repertoire. It's a haunting, repetitive pattern that seems very, very simple, but listen to the way that he sets the text and the mood that he creates. Again, this is Hawk's aria after Timmy leaves him.
I'm not one of those squeals and aprons, dangling spatulas. I'm not one of those.
So again, it's that haunting repetition. It's deceptively simple. And then you hear that troubadour music coming back and the melismas. It's part of him. He can't leave that part of him, but it's just pervasive throughout the entire piece. It's heartbreaking, that particular aria. But even more so, the next thing that happens is that Hawk reports Tim to the authorities. And it's a breathtaking act of betrayal because it dashes all of Tim's dreams. And Hawk does it because he wants Tim to hate him so much that there's no more potential between them. But even worse is that Hawk enlists Mary to deliver the news to Tim rather than doing it himself. And when Mary finally puts two and two together, she calls him a swine. You swine. How could you do this? And it's the moment that breaks me every single time I conduct this. So here's a little bit of that scene. I'm not even conducting it, and I'm like, it's getting shivers just from this scenario and how this love story is so heartbreaking. When this piece was written, it was written about past events. And now in its 10th anniversary, it feels like it's talking about current events. And I think it's our job to take these experiences and these stories to make sure that history is not forgotten and that we don't enter into a full-blooded lavender scare part 2, which we are edging towards. This is something that you'll see at the end of this production. It's the Lavender Names Project. They are photos and stories from queer people across the country and their chosen families, their relatives. It's the largest ever archival research and community outreach initiative to remember this history. And the photos and stories of these people will live on stage at the end of the opera in a visual memorial. And Kevin Newbury collects stories all the time. And these pictures and stories change in every production based upon the new stories that he's hearing. As Rob was saying, it's more important than ever to tell a story that portrays real love between two men in a very honest way, both physically and emotionally. And it's my great privilege to be a part of this production here at Glimmerglass this summer. So I hope you take a lot from this, what for me is a very, very meaningful opera, and enjoy the music, but at the same time realize what the bottom line is that this opera is talking about too. Thank you very much. I have about 5 minutes now left. I can answer any questions you might have about the opera, about me, about the music, anything. Any questions? Yes?
You were talking about in the early development of the opera, it was being workshopped. What can you tell us about the evolution, any changes that were made from then until?
Well, that's a good question. So the question was about the evolution of this piece from the workshop until now. I wasn't part of those original workshops, and that's a good question. I should ask Greg Spears, who will be here actually for the performance, as well as some of the final dress rehearsals. I think from my understanding, there were some little things here and there, tweaks, but no major large-scale changes from the piece that, I could be completely wrong. So I'm going to take a rain check on that question. And if I find you an audience, I will, and after I learn the answer to that, I will be happy to tell you what I find out. But I do a lot of workshops as far, in my role as Associate Artistic Director of American Lyric Theater, because we're in the business of being an incubator for composers and librettists to figure out how to work together to write opera. Often there's a recipe where a company chooses famous composer A, who's never written an opera, and famous writer B, who's never written an opera libretto, and say, go make a baby, here's a lot of money. And don't give them anything to set them up for success, because we know that composers and librettists have had infamous relationships throughout history, right? And there are very, very few operas by composers that, I should say, very, very few first operas by composer librettist teams that are still performed. There's a reason for that, because they're learning how to do it. And so our job is to teach people how to do it. And we also do workshops, and they learn about vocal ranges, they learn about the overall arc of storytelling, how contrasts are important from scene to scene. That's something that Greg Spears does magnificently, it's dangerous to stay in one type of rhythmic pattern for too long, because then the story and the music becomes stagnant in a way. But he does it from scene to scene in a way that it never stays too long from my point of view. That's why it does move like a Broadway play in that respect. It's very quick. There was a question here. Yes, that's you in the black.
Me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I think I'm sort of piggybacking a little bit on what you were just talking about, because I'm really curious about contemporary. We saw it at Cincinnati Opera, and you said something about it being like the 10th anniversary. I'm just really curious about how these contemporary operas, how do they rise above becoming obscure? How do companies choose contemporary operas? Or are there many operas that are just, very contemporary, just kind of, maybe they get a one blast of production and then they just are never seen again? And how is it that Glimmerglass ended up picking this particular opera, and how do we, and what happens in that process?
Right. Absolutely. That's a multifaceted question here. That's a very, very good one. Ultimately, in selecting repertoire, and I wish Robert was here, but to speak for himself, but you want a piece that's going to move an audience. Bottom line, regardless of what the story is and regardless of what the music is, you want your audience to come out with a meaningful experience, and not one where they're leaving at intermission because they hated the music or they don't understand this, or it sounds like cats scraping their paws on the tin roof. You want them to have a story that is meaningful to them, regardless of what that is. And I think when Cincinnati Opera, the way Kevin Newberry tells the story is that when they heard this, the workshop, he described it as, sometimes a staff member would stop in for, a couple minutes of rehearsal to sit in and see how rehearsals are going. And then an hour later, they're still there because they are so invested in the music and in the story that they're hearing. And it was a no-brainer for Cincinnati Opera to say, we want the premiere of this piece. And then because, partly because of the story, but also because the music is instantly familiar, even though it's not. There's something comforting about familiarity with textures and music. I think that was also attractive. And then the fact that there is a co-production, essentially, a tour of multiple companies producing the same production, it does alleviate costs, which unfortunately are a variable in considering how to produce an opera. And when you have multiple companies really wanting to jump on board, it makes the answer much easier. But, you know, as I was talking about composer A and librettist writer A or writer B, all it takes is a lot of money to put on any opera. You can put on an opera that is completely paid for by an underwriter, and they don't care about what ticket sales go on. That happens a lot in Europe, where you have government support of an opera company. They can put on pieces that might be very offensive. They might be very offensive as a production or musically, and it doesn't matter because it's all paid for. They don't care about, they don't depend on ticket sales to make it a choice, a variable as to why they choose a piece. Whereas in the United States, it's very much opposite of that. We need audiences to enjoy the piece, to want to come back, to want to tell their friends and their family to go hear it. If you hear it, if you watch it here and you know it's going on tour to other places, San Diego this summer, they're hearing it as well. You can tell your friends out there, you have to hear this opera or you have to go see it. So it's, hopefully it answers a little bit of your question. Anyone else? Yes, Kathy.
Is the music hard, because it's new, is it hard, challenging for the orchestra to learn?
Question is the music hard or challenging for the music to learn? In terms of being unfamiliar with the piece, there's a certain amount of new music learning that every musician learns. It can be a piece that, it can be a Mahler symphony that they've never played before. It could be a piece of new music that is fresh off the press that no one has heard before. With this particular opera, there is a recording online. That Cincinnati Opera that's the recording that you've been hearing all this last hour. So having that as a reference is much easier when you're following along in your part. They also have access to a full score. These are professional musicians, so they have, if they're smart, they use a lot of resources to figure out what their piece of the puzzle is. As far as the notes on the page, not necessarily really the most difficult in this particular piece. And there's a lot of repetition. And I was telling Bill Manley back there, our orchestral librarian and percussionist, that it can be easy to check out because you think it's not so hard to look on a page, but there are actually a lot of tempo changes instantly that happen between scenes that require attention in a different way. They won't be really practicing the notes like they would, Ein Held am Leben am Strauss, or any Strauss opera for that matter, or Wagner. It's not that type of opera, but, and even endurance-wise, it's only an hour in each half, so it's not that long of a play either. So, but just because it's new, I think there will be a certain amount of challenge, but I wouldn't call this the most difficult. Elizabeth Cree, for me, was a much more difficult piece for the orchestra to wrap their heads around, but our challenge will be to create textures that will allow the storytelling and the voices to come in a way that allows you to understand the story without always having to look up at the super titles. Great, I think that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, next Wednesday, same time, same location. Maestro returns to talk with us about conducting COSI. Bill and Cynthia are still trying to get enough food to feed this crew on June 30th. Ernie has $5 tickets for the Springfield Appreciation Concert. John and Rita are tired. The barn sale's been going on all week and will continue through the weekend. I have flyers about our 2 student events, and I'm still hoping for a huge crowd of kids. And then I don't know how often you all look at the Guild website, but there's tons of stuff there. We have educational material about COSI and Robin Hood. You could learn more about Robin Hood than you ever wanted to. And the activities that you can be part of. So stay and visit for a few minutes if you can, and come back next week to hear Maestro again.